Hey, Post Normies, I am getting into Disclosure Day and all of the little Easter eggs that Spielberg left in the movie today. So if you haven't seen it yet, skip this video for now because major spoiler alerts. If you're new here and you don't subscribe to my TikTok, please go check that out because there's like a ton of other information. I kind of try to edit the things that I put out on TikTok because a lot of the stuff that's on Patreon needs a more discerning audience. And if you are a member of Patreon, thank you so much. Please consider upgrading your subscription to support my work. We have such a fun time on our every other Thursday call, just discussing current events and things that are happening and all of our different ontologies and what we think might be going on here. I would love to have you guys join. There is so much I want to get into on this movie because quite arguably the least interesting part of the whole thing is the end when all of the documents get leaked. I would argue that the incredible activation journeys of these main characters are basically what is so interesting about the movie. I think for a lot of experiencers, this felt like being seen. I know a lot of other experiencers who had really emotional responses to the movie. I certainly did. I made my husband come with me and he has seen my journey and all of my experiences and was blown away at the similarities between what I have been through and what these main characters went through. I will certainly get into all that at the end, but first, I am gonna tell you everything that I saw in this movie, starting with my key takeaways. So the beginning was so visceral with that wrestling match. You really just start to understand what Spielberg is trying to say here, that here's where we are. We are in a very violent, visceral place where things like wrestling matches are entertainment, where we pay to watch people hurt other people. I think what was really interesting about the film is what this is really about. It's about authentic purpose. It's about the hero's journey. If you're familiar at all with esotericism, basically what they studied was descent and ascent narratives, where it was about overcoming and it was about figuring out what you were really here to do. The biggest tie to the Prometheus myth, not only the knowledge and wisdom activation part, but the butterfly. There is a totem of the butterfly as a symbol of something that she is given in the end. Well, Prometheus created man. Epimetheus forgot to give man his purpose. And so Prometheus actually asks Athena, the goddess of wisdom, to come and help give humanity purpose. Well, she gave them a butterfly, which, what is a butterfly? A butterfly stands for transformation. A butterfly is literally the descent into the chrysalis and the ascent into the winged one, the one who defies gravity, right? This is classic esotericism. The other thing is shared consciousness and alien technology. Well, our bodies are essentially the technology, but there definitely were some things, if you listen to that Jordan Jozak interview with Jesse Michaels about this thing they referenced as the relic that he named Sylvia. He also brought up the painting of Da Vinci of Christ holding the orb. Well, that's also the book cover of UFO of God, which is Chris Bledsoe's book. Just connecting the dots here. These are technologies that were given to us, or maybe we discovered, but they essentially unlock different levels of consciousness. I think one of my biggest takeaways is the way that we can experience extraterrestrials, NHI, in our realities is basically we are sharing consciousness. We are co-creating together, which is something that they always talk about in manifestation circles. And it became really clear to me that, oh wow, that's the nature of our experience. I found that to be kind of a helpful framework in which Steven Spielberg maybe sees reality. So it revolves around these characters basically being activated. And Daniel Kellner, who's played by Josh O'Connor, by the way, the whole cast is British, Emily Blunt, British, Colin Firth, British, Josh O'Connor, I think he might be Irish, Bono's daughter, I don't know her name, but she's Irish. They're all from the UK. Perhaps that's a reference to sort of Celtic experiencers and people who have witnessed the phenomenon having this through line of being sort of Celtic, Germanic, Native American. So that could be something. But the whole film is sort of centered around these two characters. One of them is activated when he is 15. The other one is activated more recently. And if you are following the conversation in the UFO world, then you might know about this leaked phone call with Kit Green and this woman. Can't remember her name. I'll link it below. But they're talking about how the ETs are activating people now. And if you don't know who Kit Green is, he was a CIA scientist on the high strangeness desk. In this leaked phone call, the remote viewer mentions how since 2009 or something, the ETs have started waking everyone up and people are being drawn to this conversation more and more, and they just can't stop talking about it, and they just need to know what's going on. That's very interesting, just given these two main characters' experiences. Dan gets the ability to understand physics and mathematics, the language of the universe, as Hugo says. He also later on in the movie reveals that was brought on by a cardinal. And in his sort of remembering, he's writing down mathematical formulas. He can understand the language that Margaret is speaking in her accidental news broadcast. And he basically is experiencing downloads, and he's experiencing remembering of this language so that he can understand the ETs, okay? Equally, Margaret is getting the ability to communicate with people. Miraculous and spontaneous languages. She can speak Russian, she can speak Korean, she can speak all these languages, and she can communicate with people. She can also look in their eyes and read their mind. She can also manipulate their minds into seeing whatever she wants them to see. That is extremely interesting, okay? Especially just given my experience at Contact in the Desert that I put in my personal classified archives. So extreme psychic activation. And it's revealed that they came in pairs for a reason. So she communicates with people. He communicates with them. They work together in pairs as a team to be able to lift humanity into their activations, and they're also empathy. This is important. There's knowledge and then there's wisdom. This is a Promethean reference, okay? So Prometheus is the knowledge. Athena, or the divine feminine, is the wisdom. So there's no question in my mind that it's about balance, but it's also about teamwork, and that some of us have certain gifts and some of us have other gifts, and we're going to need everybody working as a team in order to help shift things. And I think that was just that little there was always the two of you. It's not just the two of them, it's actually we have to work as a team. We have to work in pairs. We have to work with each other and each other's gifts, because not everybody has every single gift. A huge theme in the movie was empathy is a superpower, and it is the ability to listen, to put yourself in other perspectives, to feel compassion for people. And basically that was the whole message of the movie, was we have to listen to each other. I love this whole idea that Jacques Vallée talks very cryptically about. I'm always coming back to his quote about this countermeasure to the control system, and it becomes very clear that empathy, this listening, is the countermeasure to the control system. All right, I want to get into the Grail Easter eggs, because holy crap, there were so many. First of all, let's talk about the St. Clair Monastery. St. Clair is the very famous last name of this Merovingian bloodline that it is said the Templars protect. Through all of my studies, there are probably several different lineages of this extraterrestrial blood, or Nephilim blood, but St. Clair is definitely one of the most prominent bloodlines. And I thought it was interesting that they picked St. Clair Monastery. Now, it's spelled a little bit different, because the actual St. Clair, who, it's amazing because she was actually an offshoot of the St. Francis of Assisi. So she was a Franciscan monk that kind of broke off and did her own thing. She was famous for bilocating, which, if you noticed, Scanlan, the bad guy played by Colin Firth, talks about when he's sharing consciousnesses with Daniel Kellner's girlfriend, who is played by Bono's daughter, right? So he's like, I know the story so well. She bilocates as I'm doing right now. So he is admitting that he's utilizing this relic to share consciousness and to manipulate the consciousness of this person. I will just say quickly as an aside, he's using interferometry. And if you've watched any of Thomas Bearden's videos, this is like a 1980s physicist who is very famous for the work that he did on the Star Wars Now Reagan project. He talks about interferometry and interferometers only needing an image of what they are pointing to in order to affect it. So in fact, yes, just by focusing on an image of someone, you can connect in with their consciousness and manipulate it. So that was really interesting. That's just an aside. Let's keep going on the Grail stuff. Let's talk about the names. Okay. Margaret Fairchild. Given all of my research on the Rh negative MC1R stuff and the connection that it has to this sort of hybrid thing, whatever genetic splicing they did 35,000 years ago, 40,000 years ago, that caused pheomelanin to develop. This is light skin, light eyes, light hair, blonde and red hair, especially red hair. It is no coincidence that Margaret Fairchild has red hair. There's even a line at the end of the movie that says, "Did you do something with your hair?" And she's like, kind of. Bringing attention to her red hair. I will talk about a little bit about that later with the Parkinson's connection, because that's actually fucking bonkers. Okay, her name, Margaret, Mar, M-A-R. Anytime you're going to see M-A-R or M-E-R, it is a reference to water. It is a reference to the sea. It is also a reference to a title held by an extremely initiated female, like a priestess. Also, the nun's name is Mara. These are not coincidences. What he is referencing is the Sophia, the divine wisdom, the feminine. This is just unmistakable in terms of symbology here, in terms of Grail lore. These wisdom keepers of this specific tradition were all seafaring and goddess worshiping. And if you've seen my part 1 Rh negative MC1R series, you would know that it's connected to Phoenicians, it's connected to potentially Scythian, it's connected to Celtic, it's connected to Atlantis, it's connected to the Titans. They're like our great grandmothers. And I just want to mention that through Margaret's activation and her becoming this highly initiated female, she refuses religion. She refuses the idea that she would be someone's religion, which is really important as well. Let's talk about Dan. The tribe of Dan is said to have taken that bloodline into Europe. Not a coincidence. The other thing about MC1R is all the red animals. He's like, they come as animals to soothe us. But then more than half of the animals shown are either tan or red. You've got foxes, you've got cardinals, you've got the tan deer, you've got the dark red raccoon. I would argue he left out a few more, like the owl, like the red-tailed hawk. That's a very important one. Red hair is very important here, and that is what I have been looking at. And it turns out they're chemically, it makes more sense for these people to be more tuned into a certain frequency that potentially has, an extraterrestrial origin. In the context of red hair, I want to talk about Parkinson's, because that was referenced multiple times in the movie. There is a correlation between red hair and Parkinson's, and I'm going to tell you why. And I haven't gotten here in my series yet, but this is so important, because in the substantia nigra in the brain, this is where hue and pheomelanin accumulate that still reacts to sunlight but is buried back there. In pheomelanated people, in light-skinned people, there's more pheomelanin in that substantia nigra. Pheomelanin is a worse metal chelator. Okay, it's bad at processing heavy metals. And therefore, there's more heavy metals in your brain, in your body, in your blood, in your plasma. I'll say it's speculated because they're still researching, why is this a connection? Pheomelanated people have a worse time, and that can affect parts of the brain that have an impact on motor skills. Pheomelanin itself is mildly neurotoxic in large doses that involve dopamine neuron death in a specific brain region called the substantia nigra. Can't process heavy metals, they accumulate in the brain, and that can affect dopamine neuron death, which could cause Parkinson's. So it was crazy that I had been studying this in the context of MC1R. That was a significant part of this movie in regards to Margaret Fairchild's experience. Now, we didn't even talk about her last name, Fairchild. Guys, MC1R. The other thing in regards to the Parkinson's that I thought was really interesting was when they're in the train car after they've just been chased down, and she's like having a panic attack, and she's like, my hands, they're shaking like my dad's. Oh my God, I'm going to have Parkinson's. I just wanted to stop. I'm just a passenger. And he's like, you're going to be okay. And he puts her hands on the piano strings, meaning harmonics are healing. To me, that was a reference to harmonics can actually heal this. So if you're hypersensitive, you should definitely be picking up music or going to see live music or, just being around it in general, because it's really healing for you. The other thing I want to talk about is the sodium channels. So this is a direct reference to something I've been looking at in terms of Rh negative, where having no D antigen on your blood cell membrane, your sodium and calcium ion transport channels, which is basically your nervous system currency, are impacted. It's easier to move through the blood cells. That can cause anything from like faster response times to like higher and lower nervous system reactions, so more sensitivity. And I thought it was really interesting in the diving scene. He's diving on Daniel himself, and his sodium levels go bonkers because Daniel cannot be dived on because he was an experiencer. So that was cool too, because I have somewhat intuited that experiencers have added protections from things like this, things like the government looking in. Like, you can actually block them from seeing you, especially if you put on invisibility, and my reflection spell is my favorite. So anything they try to do to you, they get back directly times 12. Sorry, that's a little bit mystical, and I tend to stay away from that stuff here because I like to stick to the facts, but I'll just drop that in because it's kind of fun. And the only other thing is the Jackie Gleason thing. I mean, we all know that apparently Nixon showed Gleason some UFOs, and then Gleason couldn't sleep for weeks afterwards and basically made his house in the image of a UFO. Also, the torture of the beings, totally. I think they have done some very bad things to non-human intelligence. The only thing I'll leave you with is I was sitting next to my husband. I was having an emotional experience, and I think he was too, because, he has seen everything that I've been through in the last 3 years, and I've been like, what is happening to me? And he's like, what is happening to you? And to see so much of my experience reflected back on some level in this film felt like I'm not crazy. To some degree, I have had every single one of these experiences in this movie, down to the red animals, the speaking different languages that I don't know, miraculous healings, downloads, writing mathematical formulas, to being feel like I have to go to a physics class, to which I did. I audited one nearby, and I've never gone to every single class or read the entire textbook of any class I've ever done, but I did it for electricity and magnetism. It's the weirdest thing. I've had orb sightings, multiple orb sightings. I've had an experience with what I can only call a blue being, which Ross Coldhart then talked about being contacted by all of these people who had been contacted by blue beings, and had eye contact stuff with telepathy and reading people's thoughts, which is very new. I have taken a very suspicious photo of a being in my backyard. There's been a lot of stuff. It was really interesting to witness it from my husband's perspective, because I think he was in shock. He was in shock that so much of my experience was reflected in this movie. I have not been able to explain it, and the only way that I know how is to just go on an information finding mission and get more information and get more facts and get more data and try to understand it from the perspective of, what other people have experienced throughout time. But anyway, I just want to continue to encourage people to step into meditation and receive more information about these gifts, because I think this is what we're being asked to do. We're being asked to step into a new level of consciousness and a new level of magic. And the only way we can do that is if we lead with our heart, we follow our heart. You know, that's something that Chris Bledsoe told me at Contact in the Desert, was follow your heart. I think that's what we need to be doing. And I hope you've enjoyed this breakdown. Let me know what I missed. Let me know what you think. I can't wait to read your comments and hear what you guys think about everything.